Have you ever said yes when every fiber of your being wanted to say no? That tight feeling in your chest, the regret that follows, it's exhausting, isn't it? But what if you could turn that around? What if saying no felt empowering instead of guilt-ridden? Here's the truth. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. And with a few practical shifts, you can learn to say no confidently without feeling like the bad guy. We've all been there, saying yes to something we don't want to do just to avoid conflict or disappointing someone. Whether it's agreeing to extra work, attending an event you'd rather skip, or doing favors for people who rarely return them, the guilt of saying no can feel overwhelming. But why is it so hard in the first place? For many, it starts with the fear of being judged. Society often paints a good person as someone who's agreeable, selfless, and always there for others. Saying no can feel like rejecting those expectations and risking the label of being selfish or difficult. We worry about damaging relationships, upsetting loved ones, or facing confrontation. And then there's the inner voice, the one that whispers, "You're being too harsh," or "They'll think you don't care." This voice often stems from past experiences. Maybe as a child, you learned that pleasing others was the safest way to avoid conflict or earn approval. Or perhaps someone in your life made you feel guilty for asserting yourself, planting the seed of self-doubt that still lingers today. But here's the irony. Constantly saying yes doesn't always make people value you more. In fact, it can lead to burnout, resentment, and even strained relationships. Overcommitting leaves you stretched too thin, making it harder to deliver on promises. This can result in disappointment on both sides. Another hidden consequence of always saying yes is how it affects your sense of self-worth. When you prioritize others' needs over your own repeatedly, you start to internalize the idea that your time and feelings don't matter as much. It's a slow erosion of self-esteem that can take years to undo. For example, imagine you're the go-to person at work who always picks up the slack. At first, it feels good to be helpful, but over time, the extra workload leaves you exhausted and resentful. Meanwhile, your coworkers become so accustomed to your willingness that they stop appreciating your efforts. This is how overcommitment quietly undermines both your well-being and relationships. Recognizing this pattern is the first step. Saying no isn't about rejecting someone else. It's about honoring your own limits. It's not selfish, it's self-preservation. And with practice, it becomes not only easier, but also empowering. The guilt of saying no doesn't come out of nowhere. It's often tied to deeply ingrained beliefs about what it means to be a good friend, partner, or colleague. Maybe you were raised to always prioritize others' needs over your own, or perhaps you've been made to feel that your worth is tied to how much you give. This kind of conditioning can be hard to shake because it's reinforced by cultural messages. Think about how often you hear phrases like, "Don't be selfish," or "Good people always help." These messages can make you second-guess your decisions, even when they're necessary for your well-being. To challenge guilt, start by reframing your perspective on boundaries. Saying no isn't about rejecting the person, it's about recognizing that your time and energy are limited resources. Think of it this way. Every time you say yes to something you don't want to do, you're saying no to something else. That something else might be rest, personal growth, or time with loved ones. For instance, if a friend asks you to help with a project during a weekend you've set aside for family time, saying no doesn't mean you don't care about your friend. It means you're prioritizing a commitment that's equally important. Shifting your mindset this way can help reduce the guilt and reinforce your right to prioritize. Another powerful tool for overcoming guilt is self-compassion. When guilt creeps in, remind yourself that it's okay to have limits. It's okay to say no. The feeling of guilt doesn't mean you've done something wrong, it simply means you care. But caring doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your well-being. It's also helpful to think about the long-term impact of always saying yes. Consider how overcommitting affects your energy, relationships, and mental health. When you're constantly overwhelmed, you're less present and less able to give your best to the people and things that matter most. Lastly, understand that boundaries are a form of respect for yourself and others. When you set clear expectations, you create space for healthier, more balanced relationships. People who value and respect you will appreciate your honesty, even if it's uncomfortable at first. And those who don't, they might not belong in your inner circle. Now that you understand the struggle and the guilt, let's dive into actionable strategies to make saying no easier and more empowering. The first rule of saying no is to keep it simple. You don't owe anyone a long explanation or justification. For example, if a coworker asks you to take on an extra project, you can say, "I'd love to help, but I'm at capacity right now." This response is polite yet firm, showing that you respect their request while honoring your own boundaries. If you're nervous about saying no, practice in low-stakes situations. For instance, decline a free sample at a store or say no to a small favor from an acquaintance. These small moments build your confidence and make it easier to handle more challenging situations. Another strategy is the sandwich approach. Surround your no with positive statements. For example, if a friend invites you to an event you can't attend, you might say, "Thank you so much for thinking of me. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, I can't make it, but let's catch up soon." This approach softens the impact and reassures the person that you value the relationship. Timing also matters. If you're caught off guard by a request, it's okay to buy yourself time. Say something like, "Let me think about it and get back to you." This gives you space to consider whether the request aligns with your priorities without feeling pressured to respond immediately. When dealing with particularly pushy people, you may need to be more assertive. Use clear, direct language and avoid leaving room for negotiation. For example, instead of saying, "I don't think I can," say, "I can't." The more decisive your response, the less likely they are to push back. And remember, no is a complete sentence. If someone presses you for a reason, you're not obligated to provide one. A simple "I'm sorry, I can't" is enough. The key is to deliver your message calmly and confidently. Lastly, remind yourself that your no is just as valid as someone else's request. You are not responsible for managing other people's feelings. Your job is to communicate your needs respectfully and let them handle their own emotions. Learning to say no isn't just about avoiding guilt, it's about reclaiming your time, energy, and sense of self. When you set boundaries, you create space for the things that truly matter. Whether it's nurturing your relationships, pursuing your passions, or simply taking time to rest. One of the most transformative benefits of setting boundaries is the sense of empowerment it brings. Every time you say no to something that doesn't align with your priorities, you're saying yes to your well-being. This shift in perspective can boost your confidence and help you feel more in control of your life. Setting boundaries also leads to healthier, more authentic relationships. When you communicate your needs clearly, you encourage others to do the same. This mutual respect creates stronger connections based on understanding and trust. And while some people may initially resist your boundaries, those who truly value you will adjust and appreciate your honesty. Another long-term benefit is reduced stress and burnout. When you stop overcommitting and start honoring your limits, you'll notice a significant improvement in your mental and emotional health. You'll have more energy to focus on what's important and less resentment toward others. Finally, setting boundaries can inspire those around you to do the same. When people see you prioritizing your well-being, they're more likely to reflect on their own habits and make positive changes. This ripple effect can create a culture of respect and balance in your personal and professional life. Saying no isn't about rejecting others, it's about choosing yourself. By understanding the guilt behind saying no and reframing your mindset, you can set boundaries confidently. Every no opens up space for what truly matters. When you prioritize your time and energy, you'll feel more empowered and balanced. Next time you're tempted to say yes out of guilt, pause and ask yourself, what am I saying no to by saying yes? Your answer could change everything.